Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and a warm welcome to you. It's my pleasure and my privilege to welcome you this morning on behalf of all the organizers. We are two institutions who are celebrating our anniversaries together. My name is Shalini Randeria. I am the rector and president of the Central European University. In these troubled times, with one crisis compounding another, it may be a little foolhardy, and I may probably need to apologize for celebrating anniversaries. It reminds me in a way of the apocryphal Jewish telegram, which said, "Don't worry, all the bad news and the details follow." And the bad news is really compounding itself day by day. Yesterday's announcement of the mobilization from Moscow signals, of course, a further escalation. It affects us as a university because we have students there who are unable to cross the border and come to us. Some of our Ukrainian students are also unable to join us at the moment. The recent aggression against Armenia affects us because we have students from there as well. The continued repression and targeting of women, especially in Afghanistan, is a problem for us because we have students coming to us from Afghanistan too. The murderous attacks against civil society activists in Myanmar, just to name a few of the problems and a few of the countries from which the Central European University draws its student body, comprising of students from 102 countries. These are grave situations of insecurity, injustice, inequalities that we face, so that, as I said, I almost feel a need to apologize that we have invited you to a celebration. Yet I think there is something to celebrate, which is the establishment and the continued relevance of two institutions. My colleague Michael Landesman will talk about the WIIW, the Vienna Institute for International and Economic Studies. In German, they are comparing the economies. It's Wirtschaftsvergleich. In English, they've dropped the comparison, and he may want to explain that semantic twist to you. Let me just speak very quickly for the Central European University, which is the younger of the two institutions. And my friend Ivan Krastev is here, actually the IWM, the Institute of Human Sciences, at which I was until last year, is celebrating its 40th birthday. So it's 50, 40, and 30. Three institutions in this city, all of which are in very interesting ways bridges between Eastern and Western Europe. For the Central European University, let me just say a couple of words, and that is, in a sense, you could say our university was born of an audacious idea 30 years ago, George Soros's idea to transform our societies through the power of education. We are making a new home, as you know, in Vienna. It's actually our 31st anniversary, to be precise, after in a dramatically transformed regional and global context, and a context which is increasingly inhospitable to the values which characterize the CEU, the values of open society and of democracies. And yet I think that makes our mission ever more relevant and urgent. In 1991, we were established as a trans-regional Central European University, with a bold vision. And the vision was to educate scholars, leaders, civil society activists to further free markets and liberal democracies in this part of the world. The historic importance of a free university, of the institution of the university as a self-governing institution, upholding academic freedom, and thus pivotal to democratization, lies therefore in our very foundation. Freedom of expression and the development of creative critical thinking is something which the CEU has upheld for all these 3 decades and was punished for it by being turned out of Hungary. We fought for those values, we stand for those values, and we've paid a price for those. We've built our reputation on our cosmopolitan international ethos, but our spirit is that of fostering not only intellectual curiosity, but also of trying to build open societies through imparting education, but education with values, affordable education, and education which turns young scholars into concerned and engaged citizens. And to ensure that when they leave the university, they engage with challenges of the world. And that's what we are here today to do, to engage in some of the challenges which my two colleagues, Bela Graskovic and Michael Landesman, who have actually crafted the program together, the challenges of integration, inequality, and insecurity in Europe and beyond, that they have charted out for us in our program today and for tomorrow. A special welcome to Mary Kaldor, who will be giving this evening's keynote address. And with that, I pass on the word to Michael, and thank you very much for joining us in the event.
Good morning. I'm not Michael Landesman. I'm Hannes Solbert. Sorry, no problem. It's an honor to be compared with Michael Landesman, so to mix up. So it could be much worse. Thank you very much for coming, and let me say also a few words. First of all, we are very happy that the Central University is coming to, Central European University is coming to Vienna, but we are very sad, of course, that it had to leave Hungary because of the whole development, undemocratic development in Hungary, where we hope at least that the pressure of the European Union will be a bit greater and more thorough than it was in the past, because we cannot be happy just that institutions leave Hungary. We only can be happy if Hungary is forced to change its domestic and international policies. But let me say few words about the Vienna Institute, if I may shorten it. The Vienna Institute had its main purpose to look into the east of Europe when the East was not very much known by the West. And of course, we experienced all together in different positions. When I was still in the European Parliament and had a lot of honorable work to do on the enlargement issue, that Europe grew together. Integration was the big challenge, the big name, and the big success. And therefore, we are very sad when we now have to look into this integration process. And in trying, which is also the subject of tomorrow's event here, trying to overcome that fractured world. And it was just mentioned that the world is even more fractured with the speech of President Putin yesterday. But what is very important, looking into Europe and dealing with Europe, East and West, and this still is our main subject in the Vienna Institute, the integration process, that we also have to look to the outside world. And therefore we started already. Is it China? Is it the Mediterranean? And of course we have our main subjects, but we only can deal with Europe and Europe integration if we look also to the outside world. And it is Ivan Krastev, who just has been mentioned, will be one of the first speakers, who made it very clear, if you want to have a successful European integration process, if you want to have Europe as a global actor, you have to look to the outside world and you have to think about it. May I just mention two events, I may deal a bit more tomorrow in the final discussion. When Queen Elizabeth died, everybody was mourning, we thought. Not everybody. There were people who were mourning perhaps about the person, but thinking about what happened in the past when colonialism, slave trade was part of the British Empire. And as Tennessee Williams said, the past is never history and the past is not even past. So even this past is is working. And when we had this vote in the United Nations about the awful Russian aggression against Ukraine, then we were astonished that many leaders and representatives did not vote for condemning the Russian intervention. And by chance, they have been about representing the half of the population of this world. So I think it is very good for this seminar, and thank you very much for the organizers, that thinking about integration, especially also European integration, we start with a look to the outside, to the global world. And of course we can and have to say, and this very moment is confirmed day by day, that even if some deglobalization may happen in the economic field, in the political field, there's a strong retreat from global action and global cooperation. And that is one of the main challenges, I think, for the integration process. How maybe to have another form, a more sustainable form of economic globalization, but on the other hand, to retreat from the retreat on the political field, because if we only have this concern about the economic globalization and don't think about the political globalization and cooperation to solve some of the major issues like climate policy, we will utterly fail. So unfortunately, this event is taking place in not the best times. But I know that even Grastev and some others of you have some glimpses of hope sometimes, even if skepticism is prevailing. But again, thank you very much for your organizing. Thank you very much for the cooperation with the Central European University. And I think it is a good example for this kind of cooperation. And in that sense, of course, we are happy that you are here and that you are so active in the city. The city can never have enough intellectual capacity. So having a new one is very good for the city and for my own country. And that is a very good thing. Thank you very much.
Sorry for so many introductory short speeches. Well, first of all, thank you very much for all of you coming. So my name is really Michael Landesmann. I used to be scientific director of the Vienna Institute, and I just want to mention Robert Sterer and Mario Holzner are now the driving force behind running the institute, scientific director and executive director. And I also want to mention Ingrid Gatzeri, who is staying here and has been with the Institute since its inception, I guess. So I shouldn't mention the numbers of years in this respect, but very much the life and heart, as my predecessor used to say of the Institute. So I want to clear up one point which Shalini mentioned. Why did we change our name? In fact, it really was true that our institute was called Institute for Comparative Economic Studies, just like the German translation. And when I came in, it was one of my first actions against some resistances in the institute to change it into international economic studies. And I think it was a way of gesturing, a gesture that, well, you have to think about it. I came in 1995, yeah? That at that point, transition was in full swing. And I think that as an academic discipline, comparative economic studies was really about systemic differences. Yeah, in German, it didn't sound so much. It didn't really establish a discipline. Yeah, Wirtschaftsvergleiche. Now, of course, with hindsight, if one looks at the world now, systemic differentiation starts to reappear. So I think it has a justification to, of course, keep this tradition of the institute alive. And in fact, it is alive. And I think you can see that in the program that we are very careful to monitor differentiation across countries, across regions, and so on. So I think our in-depth knowledge about differentiation, which probably differentiates us from many of the international financial institutions, which have a blanket assessment of what is needed across countries, we emphasize that you really have to know what's going on in particular countries, in combinations, in groups of countries, etc. And I think you will see that reflected, especially in the afternoon session here. Now, coming to today's program, which is, and I want to thank very much Bella Greskowitz. We really jointly designed the ideas and the program and invited the speakers for this conference. I think we had very pleasurable and enjoyable interactions in a number of coffee house meetings about that. And I think it really showed the pooling of our resources of the two institutes. I mean, we as an economic research institutes, all the conferences I was involved in was pure economics. I mean, of course, politics always played a role, but we were not experts on that. And so we are very grateful for this cooperation with CEU, who covers the entire gamut of all social science disciplines. And I think it will be reflected in that conference, that to understand the issues and the complexity of the issues, the challenges of the issues we are going to cover in this conference really requires a multidisciplinary approach. And as with all multidisciplinary efforts, it's not an easy thing. People come from their own discipline. So I think it's more the coming together of people who bring their knowledge of their disciplines in, but to get a complete picture is the interaction and the dialogue between them, which is necessary. Now, there are three main themes. Bella might characterize it slightly differently here, which I think will go through that conference, and they are interrelated themes. Yeah? It was already alluded to, integration, and of course, the steps backward from integration, the elements of where we see challenges and tensions in the integration processes is a driving issue of this conference. And of course, we have to understand them. It's not just stating them and observing them. And I think what we try to do is to see, can we understand what's going on, and the sort of very big policy challenges and political challenges which emerge out of these tensions of integration and disintegration. And this is not only happening at the EU level, it's happening at the broader European level, and it's happening at the global level. And I think there are long run issues there, which are probably driving forces of such developments and the challenges. One is unbalanced growth, the rise of some countries, the relative decline of other countries, different policy scenarios, the fall of or decline of multilateralism, which is reflecting also different interest positions of countries, etc. But apart from these more longer run tendencies, we see Europe and the world has been exposed to a succession of shocks. I mean, most in our memories, of course, the financial crisis in the 89-90, the COVID crisis, the Russia-Ukraine war situation. And I think these shocks additionally expose integration process to major appearances of underlying structural differences across countries, across groups of countries, etc. If you think about the financial crisis, it's the first time it really was clearly visible that there was a north-south divide in Europe. We can see now with the Russia-Ukraine crisis, there's somewhat of an east-west divide in positioning on the issue of relationship towards Russia, support of sanctions, etc. Yeah? So there are new combinations of groupings of countries, of interest formations, which appear as a result of these shocks. Yeah. So one element, one theme is integration, disintegration. But then what is behind that? Well, we have to understand the differentiation across countries, across groups of countries, the heterogeneity of trajectories we can see economically, politically, socially in different countries. And I come back to this issue of comparative country and group of country research, which I think will be very important for us. And why are countries moving along heterogeneous paths? I think for that, we brought in this other issue of inequality in the title of the conference. We have to understand to which extent different social groups in countries, in different regions, are unequally exposed to the major structural changes which are speeding up, the shocks which are exerted on societies, on regions, on different groups in employment, different age groups, different educational entertainment groups, etc. And I think this is a theme which I think at least political scientists started to take very seriously to understand the politics of nations, of countries, and political process in countries. What are the underlying structural differentiations in societies in which they express themselves? So that's the second theme, inequality, the different impacts. And the third theme is the political expression of all these developments. How do these unequal trajectories across countries, across regions, the unequal impact on different groups in society express themselves politically and shape political processes in different countries? And again, it's very important to observe the rather subtle differentiations which are happening in relation to populist movements, to different party programs, to the rise and fall of different political expressions, platforms, etc. And I think we observe all that. So from a social science point of view, it's a wonderful period for us to understand how this interaction between structural determinants, differentiation in societies, the impact of shocks, the impact of technological structural transformations translates into politics. So I think our third theme, which will go through the conference, is basically the interaction between politics and the underlying themes: integration, disintegration, social differentiation, political differentiation. I hope I mapped out a little bit what the subject of the conference is. Bella might have a completely different way of thinking about it. Thank you for coming.
So I am Bela Grešković. I am university professor at the Central European University, an old piece of furniture at that place. I am one of the founding members of the political science department and then the international relations department. I have basically two fields of interest. One is international and comparative political economy, and the other, which is actually my current focus of research, is the social basis, the civil society background of ascending right-wing populist projects and political leaders. Now, I introduce the second part of the conference. This will also mean a very interesting change of the place. So here we are among the imperial facades of a wonderful, now small country, right? With all the grandeur. Tomorrow, we move to Favoriten, which is a classical working class district, right? We fit there very well, Central European University, if you agree with me, Shalini. So I hope that everybody will follow us there, because there we will face directly some of the issues on which the morning session will focus. And these include basically the transnational movements, not the comparative aspect, but the international political and economic aspects of capital, labor, finance, services, including the care economy, or the non-movement, see energy, and all the problems that these transnational relationships might create. In some sense, the movement or non-movement of these factors of economic, social, and political exchange were against, or were in the hintergrund, the background of all the major crises, or many of them of the past 20 years. The financial crisis, the migration crisis, the crisis of social reproduction, the crisis of energy, as we see now. If you add the pandemics and the war ongoing, then you may even go back to biblical, how to say, analogies. Now, we had some debate with Michael about whether to use this flowery language. And as you all know, economists are very Puritan in their categories and rigorous, but political scientists actually can allow some sort of poetry. So I would say we are in a time, actually, without much exaggeration, where all the four apocalyptic horsemen are on the ride. War, conquest, pestilence, death, and famine is coming. So this first session will also count and discount and criticize some of the illusions that the movement of these factors of production created. Financial stability, that migration can actually solve problems of labor shortage, that problems of social reproduction in the rich countries can actually be solved by importing from peripheral countries people who would do the care economy, and energy. It's a major issue. Energy, when I was first teaching political economy at the Central European University, it was the political economy of energy was basically a political economy of the paradox of plenty. So it tried to explain how countries who were rich in natural resources actually suffer from the natural resources. Nobody ever thought that this can be actually such a tough weapon, if weaponized in a situation. So there is a lot to discover, even about traditional political economy topics. Now, the last session basically has lectures that try to problematize and intervene into a big debate about the ascending political and economic leadership under the banner of what is called populist authoritarianism, right-wing authoritarianism. And this big issue is, are we witnessing the rise of rational choice type of cynical leaders who are only interested in power grabbing, namely power without purpose, power for power? Or is there something that these people really want, or their following really want? Power with purpose. So the arguments and the issues that were discussed in the lectures open up questions, because they all point some ideological content of the rising populist power. The first is related to basically majoritarian democracy, illiberal democracy, put it to the extreme. This is sort of an ideological background that might be attractive for some. There is a presentation about the moral economy of authoritarian populism. What are people have in mind when supporting authoritarian populists and engage in economic transactions? Do they attribute moral significance, moral meaning to their economic actions? Related to it, one issue that is going across a variety of populist authoritarian political projects is a war on gender. That is also pretty much taken seriously. People who follow this ideology, this idea, imagine a social situation in which all the emancipation, or much of it, that happened to women, and not only women, is a thing of the past. And finally, there will be a presentation about the kind of political project that relates to the understanding of populist leadership of the people. Now, the traditional idea about populist authoritarianism that they restrict political rights. Now, we have a number of authoritarian leaderships that tries to extend on an ethnic basis. How to cope with this? So there is a lot to think about. New stuff is going on. We need to understand if we want to come up with powerful counter ideologies and organize it. So in this spirit, I welcome everybody at the conference and I wish us a big intellectual fiesta.
Start straight away with the first panel.